Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. Here to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. As we were wrapping up our last episode, an episode in which we were discussing Morrissey's brand new album, Makeup is a Lie, an album that we've all been living with for about a month or so, we began to compare this album in terms of quality, to see how it stacks up to some of the other albums that Morrissey has released during his modern era. Modern era previously being defined as anything that was released after the year 2000. So to compare Morrissey's brand new album, Makeup is a Lie, to the first album in Morrissey's modern era, that being 2004's You Are the Quarry, I don't know, that doesn't really seem like a very fair fight, because in my opinion, You Are the Quarry is about as perfect an album as there is. In fact, I would go as far as to say that You Are the Quarry is easily my favorite album in the modern Morrissey era. Now, this was something that I used to believe that most Morrissey fans agreed upon. Now, despite the fact that we are very devout in terms of our loyalty to the dude, I would say that we are not necessarily the most tight-knit community. I would say that we are a community of people that at times is capable of bickering and infighting, but for some reason, I've always thought that You Are the Quarry is one of the albums that pretty much everybody within the Morrissey fan community agrees on. That is, basically until I started doing this channel, at which point in time I've been told by people that they don't like the album. I've been told by people that they think that the album is overrated. Now, if that happens to be your particular stance, I've got news for you, my friend. Your face is overrated. Because You Are the Quarry, in my opinion, is about as snug an album that Morrissey has released since the classic era. So to compare the brand new album, Makeup is a Lie, to You Are the Quarry, I would say no. You Are the Quarry is a far superior product. But fast forwarding to 2006, Ringleader of the Tormentors, I think you're going to have a more compelling argument in favor of Makeup is a Lie, because, in my opinion, Ringleader of the Tormentors was, and probably will always be a bit of a disappointment. Now, I don't know that that is necessarily the album's fault. I think coming out of 2004, You Are the Quarry, my expectations for Ringleader of the Tormentors were very high. In fact, I would say that they may have been unfairly elevated based on how much it was that I loved You Are the Quarry. So I ran out immediately upon its release and I bought Ringleader of the Tormentors. I brought it home, I threw it on the stereo, and basically it just sat there. So I listened to it again, and it just sat there. And I listened to it again, and it just sat there. And we continued this cat and mouse game for many months until the album began to very slowly sort of grow on me. It is an album still, despite the fact that the album is 20 years old. I cannot believe that Ringleader of the Tormentors is 20 years old. But despite the fact that the album is 20 years old, I would say that it is an album still that has never really found itself a way into my crusty old heart. This is an album that I don't go back and listen to start to finish very often. I might break this record out and listen to it all the way through, maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year. At the very most, it is an album that, I think compared to You Are the Quarry is a big disappointment. I think that it always has been. So, comparing the new album, Makeup is a Lie, to Ringleader of the Tormentors, I would say that yes, Makeup is a Lie is a better album than Ringleader of the Tormentors. You can't say the same thing, though, about 2009's Years of Refusal. In my opinion, not only is it one of the greatest albums in Morrissey's modern era, I would say it is one of Morrissey's greatest albums, period. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Years of Refusal is probably Morrissey's last classic album. Now, when this album was released back in 2009, I think it benefited where Ringleader of the Tormentors suffered, because where Ringleader of the Tormentors was following up You Were the Quarry, Years of Refusal was following up Ringleader of the Tormentors, an album, I said before, I didn't necessarily love it. I've heard other people say that it's one of their favorite Morrissey albums of all time. I've heard a couple people say it's actually their favorite Morrissey album of all time. You and I need to have a conversation, because that is math that, in my mind, just simply doesn't add up. But in 2009, when Years of Refusal was announced, I was wondering in my head, okay, is this going to be more You Are the Quarry, or is this going to be more Ringleader of the Tormentors? Now, keep in mind, when I'm asking myself this question, I'm not suggesting that stylistically the album was going to resemble either one, because Morrissey is an artist that never repeats himself. He does not live in the rearview mirror. His train is always moving forward. So when I was thinking to myself, is it going to be more Quarry or is it going to be more Ringleaders, I was thinking more in terms of quality. But I bought Years of Refusal, of course, the day it was released. I brought it home, I listened to it, and it was an album that just immediately grabbed me by the plums and has not relinquished its grip since 2009. So to compare Makeup Is a Lie to Years of Refusal, I would say that is easy. Years of Refusal is way better, in my opinion. That is an album that, even still to this day, is probably one of the most unique in Morrissey's catalog, because it's just so different than anything that he released before, or really since. I remember listening to that album for the first time, and I was just blown away by how loud and clanky and brash and pissed off and bratty it was. It was an album that I immediately loved, an album that I still love to this day. Comparing the new album, Makeup Is a Lie, to 2014's World Peace Is None of Your Business, I think that one is actually relatively easy in the other direction. I think that Makeup Is a Lie is miles better than World Peace Is None of Your Business. World Peace is an album that, despite the fact that it's 12 years old, I really have never come to terms with how it is that I feel about that album. That is an album that isn't necessarily bad. It is an album that, in my opinion, if it commits any crime, it's that it's just a little bit boring. That is an album also that I very rarely go back and listen to. That is an album that is sort of conspicuous by its absence on all of the streaming services. This is an album that I go back and I listen to maybe 2-3 times a year, start to finish. It is an album that, if it were on the streaming services, it is an album that I would probably be more prone to go back and listen to more often, because I do spend a lot of time in my car. I listen to music in my car a lot, and if it were available on the streaming services, it is an album that I would probably be willing to go back and listen to a little bit more than I do. It's the same exact thing with Swords, which of course is a compilation. Swords is awesome. I think Swords is a million times better than World Peace Is None of Your Business. But, it is an album that never really did a lot for me. I would say that it's a little bit too down-tempo. It's a little bit boring. I would also say that when I saw that tour back in 2014, it was probably my least favorite Morrissey tour, despite the fact that he played Asleep, which I was happy after that. When he broke into the song Asleep, I was basically done. I was like, all right, this is a song I never thought I'd get a chance to see live ever. Makeup Is a Lie, in my opinion, is better, easily better than World Peace Is None of Your Business. Now, comparing the new album to 2017's Low in High School, I think there is a conversation, because Low in High School is an album that I like a lot. It is an album, though, that I would accuse of being a little bit bipolar. I would say the stuff that I like on Low in High School is stuff that I absolutely love, whereas some of the weaker material on that album is some of the weakest material that Morrissey has produced throughout the course of his career. So, weighing those albums top to bottom, I would probably take Makeup Is a Lie over Low in High School. Now, comparing where we left off on my last episode was comparing the new album to California Sun, which was released in 2019. I've always said this about California Sun. California Sun is a difficult album in Morrissey's catalog to compare to anything else, because it is the cover album. I remember when the album was announced, I wasn't exactly sure how I felt about it, because in my opinion, Morrissey is not only the greatest singer in the history of rock and roll, more importantly, he is the greatest songwriter in the history of rock and roll. He seems to me to be rather prolific. It seems as if his gun is, always loaded. So in 2019, I was a little bit confused as to why it was that Morrissey had committed to recording an all-covers album. But I would say that a little bit of my, apprehension was put to bed once I started perusing the song list. It is an album that I like very much. It is an album that I go back and listen to all the time. It is an album that I listen to probably as much, if not more, than some of the other albums in Morrissey's modern era. I would say my favorite song off of that album is Easy. It is Days of Decision, the Phil Ochs cover. Phil Ochs is not only one of my musical heroes, but one of my political heroes. I've done a couple episodes on this channel where I've talked about Phil Ochs a while back. I did an episode where I ranked Phil Ochs' catalog. Phil Ochs is somebody that we need more now today than when he was actually active in the music industry. Phil Ochs, unfortunately, as I'm sure you all well know, Phil Ochs passed away sadly back in 1976, but I think that he is as important as he was back in the 1960s, back in the Vietnam and the Civil War era. His music still holds up to this day, so if you are somebody that is unfamiliar with Phil Ochs, I would highly urge you to go and check it out. But to compare Make Up Is a Lie to California Sun, is a little bit difficult, but I would probably take Make Up Is a Lie based on the fact that it is primarily original material, which is not to suggest that California Sun is one of my lesser favorite Morrissey albums, because it is a cover album. In fact, I don't think it would even be accurate to say that California Sun is one of my least favorite Morrissey albums of all time. But that brings us to today. We are going to be comparing Morrissey's brand new album, Make Up Is a Lie, to its youngest sibling and the only other album that has been released in what I am now going to be describing as Morrissey's postmodern era. Postmodern era being defined as anything released after the year 2000. The album in question is, up until about a month ago, Morrissey's most current album, 2000's I Am Not a Dog on a Chain. So what we are going to do today is we are going to compare these two albums face to face to find out which is the superior disc. Now you may be asking yourself, why am I watching this? Why am I listening to this twit? Well, that, I can't really help you with. But what I can help you with is explaining how we are going to figure out today which one of these two albums reigns supreme. What we are going to do is we are going to pit these two albums together, grudge match style, album versus album, to find out which, in fact, is the better record. The way that we are going to do that is we are going to go through each track, album by album. We are going to compare them. We are going to compare track 1 to track 1, track 2 to track 2, track 3 to track 3. You sort of understand where it is that we are heading at this point in time. After we discuss each track, we are going to determine which of the two is the superior track, and that album will receive a point. At the end of the game, we add up the points, and that album will have its arms raised in supremacy. Now, there is one problem that we have to sort of figure out how we are going to deal with before we continue on today's episode. That being that this album right here, 2020's I'm Not a Dog on a Chain, which weighs in at a relatively healthy 11 tracks, but its opponent from 2026, Make Up Is a Lie, weighs in at a relatively rotund 12 tracks. It's possible that Morrissey was ingesting more carbs during the recording of this process. So what we are going to do, in order to sort of even out the tail of the tape, is we are going to remove one song from Morrissey's brand new album, Make Up Is a Lie, in order to level out the playing field The song in question, which we are going to be removing from the competition, is the song Amazona. The reason why we are going to remove Amazona from today's proceedings, we are going to place it firmly on the bench, is because it is a cover song. Nothing against it personally. It is a song that I am a fan of. I've mentioned it on this channel many times in the past. I mentioned it when it was released as a single. You know, Roxy Music is a band that I'm probably just too dumb to understand. They just are an act that simply does not fertilize my eggs. If you are a fan of the original version of Amazona, I don't believe that there's anything in the Morrissey version to dislike. I think it is a relatively faithful, true to the original version. It is a good song, but it simply does not fit in today's competition because we need to even out the playing field. Now, one nice thing about today's competition is that we actually will have an odd number of songs. The first time I played this game on this channel a while back, I was comparing two albums by another one of my favorite bands of all time, that being the Mr. T Experience. I don't remember exactly the number of tracks that were on the albums I was comparing, but it turned out to be an even number, at which point in time that episode ended in a tie. I remember thinking to myself, what in the hell is this? Soccer? I mean, come on, Jim, you can do better than that. Fortunately, a tie is not in the cards here today. So let's get on with it without any further ado. Let me introduce to you in this corner, from 2020 up until about a month ago, Morrissey's brand new album, I Am Not a Dog on a Chain. This is an album that I did a full episode on back in the infancy of this channel. If you don't think that these episodes I make now are worth watching, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend going back and watching the archives, if you understand what I'm saying. But this is an album that I am very much a fan of. It is an album that I was very much a fan of upon its release. Now, this album, what makes this album unique in terms of Morrissey's catalog, I believe that every single album in Morrissey's catalog is unique. I think that is one of the fun things about being a Morrissey fan. I think that every single album, whether it is your favorite or your least favorite, I think that they all are a very important chapter in the story. But one of the things that makes this album unique is, of course, this album was released in 2020. A lot of people refer to this as the COVID album. This was an album that I pre-ordered upon it being announced. It was an album that arrived at my doorstep both on CD and vinyl. During the pandemic, it was an album that sort of helped me get through the pandemic. It's hard to imagine that 2020 COVID, if you will, was 6 years ago. That was when my wife and I moved down here to Nashville. Was during COVID. We were sort of COVID refugees, if you will. My wife and I, we both work in an industry where we are forced to interact with people all day, every day. And of course, during the pandemic, what we do for a living was basically shut down. And so we decided to venture out there into the world, try to find a place that was a little bit more open than where it was we were living before. And Nashville was a place that we were familiar with. It was a place that we knew. We knew people here. My wife and I are both big music nerds, so it just seemed like a good fit at the time. I remember our strategy at the time was we would come down here to Nashville. We would sign a year lease. We would write it out. At the end of that year, we would take an assessment of where we were at and how we were feeling. And things must have gone pretty well because we're still down here 6 years later. We own our own home. And, you know, honestly, as much guff as I can give Nashville sometimes for being, you know, the buckle of the Bible Belt, it is a relatively nice place to live. It is a place that has incredible music venues, incredible record stores. It is a place that, at the end of the day, as much as I do get homesick for my friends and family out in California, it is a place, I think, that has been a good home for us. It is a place that I feel relatively lucky to call home. This album, though, is an album that was, of course, released during COVID. It showed up at my doorstep, delivered on release day. It was a record that really did help me sort of get through COVID. There were a few things that really sort of helped me get through COVID, music being one of them. My wife and I actually really killed it during COVID. We worked out, we ate healthy, we didn't watch TV, we were creative, we listened to music, we sort of pursued our creative ventures. COVID was something that we just destroyed, man. But unfortunately, you start burning through your money, you got to go back to work. That's sort of how we ended up here in Nashville. But this is what I always think of when I think of this album. I think of it showing up on my doorstep during COVID, helping me get through that sort of relatively boring time, if you will. This is an album that I think, because it was released during COVID, is an album that I remember coming out to very little fanfare, very little publicity, very little promotion. Of course, there was no tour. So it appeared that this, it seemed to me that this album just sort of appeared in the stores or in the marketplace, and then it just sort of drifted away. It was an album that a lot of people never really talked about. It was an album that, to this day, I think one of the big crimes about this album is, obviously, we are back to normal life. We've been back to normal life for a long time. Morrissey has been out there touring. He's been canceling shows at will. It would appear to me that this is an album that just does not get any love, not only from a lot of the fans, but from Morrissey himself. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this album is very, very, very noticeably neglected on the live stage. This is an album that I am a big fan of. This is an album, though, that I do believe is a little bit divisive within the Morrissey fan community. I have heard people tell me they don't like this album. I remember not long after this album was released, I was talking to a client one day, somebody that was a self-proclaimed Morrissey fan, and we got on the topic of Dog on a Chain because it was the current album at the time, and it was still a current album at the time, and he told me that he disliked this album so much that he wished it had never been released. I remember thinking to myself, now there's albums in Morrissey's catalog that I definitely think of as lesser albums. I mean, I've discussed Southpaw Grammar on this channel many times in the past. In my opinion, Southpaw Grammar is easily at the bottom of the Morrissey Ocean, lying right next to the Titanic wreckage. But that doesn't mean that it's an album that I wish had never been released. I can't imagine thinking that about any Morrissey album at all. I remember sort of pressing him on the issue, and he basically told me he didn't think that there was one quality nugget on this entire album. Now, you want to talk about non-quality nuggets. Let's discuss the artwork, shall we? I remember when this album was announced and the artwork was sort of released, I remember literally getting on my hands and knees and praying to God, or whatever it is that you believe in, that this was not actually the artwork for the album. Because this is not only Morrissey's weakest album cover, I might go as far as to suggest that this might be one of the worst album covers of all time. How a man like Morrissey, who is known as being as vain as he is, how he ever signed off on this photograph is something that I will simply never understand, unless I'm mistaken. I believe that you can actually see nose hair, Steve. Now, the back art, I love. This should have just been the front artwork. Or perhaps you could have come up with a photograph that was a little bit more flattering than the one that you went with. But as far as the album itself goes, it's an album I like. It's an album that I've always liked. Is it going to compare favorably to Make Up Is a Lie? I don't really know. In this corner from 2026, also weighing in at a shaved down 11 tracks, is Morrissey's brand new album, Make Up Is a Lie, an album that I've done my duty as a fan. I've bought multiple copies. I have 2 on vinyl. I have the indie exclusive red vinyl, which came with this pretty snug slip mat. I also went out and I purchased the Zoetrope vinyl, which I also think is pretty snug, although this one is still sealed, to be perfectly honest with you. I also have purchased this album on CD. Morrissey requested us fans, if we were capable, to buy multiple copies of this record in order to not only support him, but also support his cause. So I've done my due diligence. I've proven that I am a legitimate fan, Steve. So next time you plan on coming to my neck of the woods, in payback, I would appreciate it if you showed up, son. Anyway, this is an album, I mentioned it on my last episode, that is the culmination of a 5-year melodrama. Beginning back in 2001, when it was announced that Morrissey had completed work on an album called Bonfire of Teenagers. Not long after that, it was announced that Morrissey had signed to Capitol Records, at which point in time he released the first single, Rebels Without Applause. This was a single that I very much loved, a song that still to this day I am absolutely in love with. Not long after the single was released, it was announced that Morrissey had been dropped by the label and that the label was going to retain the intellectual property for the album and that the album was going to be placed in a vault and dropped into Mariana Trench, where it was never going to be seen again. In 2024, it was announced that Morrissey had purchased back the rights to the album Bonfire of Teenagers. Along with it, he purchased back the rights to his album from 2014, World Peace is None of Your Business. Now, I just talked about this album a second ago. I was a little bit surprised in 2024 that Morrissey didn't make more of a big hubbub over the album World Peace is None of Your Business, because it is an album that would have celebrated a 10-year anniversary that year. It is also an album that Morrissey himself has sort of, tried to convince us is his favorite in his entire catalog. Now, I don't know that Morrissey necessarily believes that, or if it's just something that he's saying to have the opposite opinion of everybody else. I mean, sometimes you have a hot take that's a hot take because it's wrong. Saying that world peace is none of your business, Stephen, trust me, man, hey, it's your work. I respect you. I respect your opinion. But saying that world peace is none of your business is your greatest album, that's wrong. I mean, people say you can't have wrong opinions. It's wrong. But in 2004, when I saw that tour twice in Birmingham and Indianapolis, Morrissey played 3 other songs that were going to be included originally on the Bonfire of Teenagers album. Apart from playing Rebels Without Applause, he also played a song called I Am Veronica, a song called I X Love You, and a song called, of course, The Telephone Rings. My opinions of those songs sort of varied. I really love Rebels Without Applause. I really love the song I Am Veronica. I thought I X Love You was pretty good, and to be perfectly honest with you, I simply could not stand, of course, The Telephone Rings. Not long after that tour, it was announced by Morrissey that he had completed work on a second album. An album that was going to be called Without Music, the World Dies, which meant at the time, Morrissey had 2 albums in the can in search of a business partner to help him release them. Not long after that, it was announced that Morrissey had signed to Sire Records and that he was going to be, in fact, releasing the second album of the 2, which was now being called You're Right, It's Time, which meant it was going to hurdle Bonfire of Teenagers, which in my opinion has now been relegated as basically the golden plates of rock and roll. I see no tangible evidence that the album actually exists, nor do I believe that you have seen any tangible evidence that this album actually exists. We simply have to have faith that it does. Earlier, at the very end of last year, I should say, Morrissey released the first single off of the new album, which was now the title track for the album, Makeup Is a Lie. Over the next few weeks, Morrissey released 2 other singles, and on March 6th, 2026, the melodrama had come to an end, and we were all gifted Morrissey's brand new album, Makeup Is a Lie, an album that I am, for the most part, very happy with. I do believe, as I mentioned a second ago, I can't speak for the Morrissey fan community because we are a community of individualists as devout as we are to him. We oftentimes disagree with one another, so I can't speak for you. I can simply speak for myself and say that this is an album that I am very happy with. I think, based on a lot of the comments and reviews I've seen, I think a lot of the fans are relatively happy with this album. Of course, the press have just shredded this album in their reviews. That is something that is very predictable. I expected it. Of course, the haters are always going to hate Morrissey, regardless of what it is that he does or says or releases. So, of course, the haters are just all over him. But, relatively speaking, I'm very happy with the new album. It basically, exceeds the expectations that I had coming into it. My expectations were make it at least as good as Dog on a Chain. Now, we're going to find out in just a minute if it is as good or better. But having listened to the two of them, many times over the past week, I would say that it is at least as good as Dog on a Chain, which was my hope going into it. So what we are going to do right now is we are going to begin the festivities. I have my little scorecard right here, and we are going to go through each track, and we are going to determine which one is better in order to ascertain which one of Morrissey's two newest albums is, in fact, King of the Castle. So what we're going to do is we are going to begin with Dog on a Chain. Age will go first today. I guess age gets the courtesy or whatever they say. So the first song on side one of I Am Not a Dog on a Chain is the song Jim Falls. I remember the first time I heard this song, I really liked it. I really liked the sort of industrial instrumental opening. I think that this song is basically about following your dreams and walking the walk, essentially. I think this album is here to tell you, or this song, I should say, is here to tell you that talk is cheap. You need to be committed to who you are. You need to follow your dreams, regardless of what it is that other people say. I think that this is a reoccurring theme on both of these albums. There are a couple reoccurring themes on both of these albums. Age being another one. I really like the song Jim Falls, but that song is going up against what was the original. Actually, that's not even true. I was going to say the original title track off of the new album, which the original title was going to be Without Music, the World Dies. I love that title. As soon as I heard the title, Without Music, the World Dies, I loved it. But when it was announced that You're Right, It's Time was the title of the album, I was like, I don't know. I don't know that necessarily has a real ring to it. I think Makeup Is a Lie, in terms of an album title, is probably a better title for the album than You're Right, It's Time. Let me get these CDs out of here. All right, so the first song is You're Right, It's Time. Again, this was supposed to be the original title track after they changed the title from Without Music, the World Dies. I love this song. I love the intro lyric where he says, I want to move away from those who stare at screens all day. I remember hearing that lyric for the first time at Luna Records in Franklin, Tennessee. My wife and I went down there a week before the album was released. And we went to the pre-release listening party we picked up from Free Swag. The reason why I went, really, there's several reasons why I went, really, but one of the main reasons why I went was because up until this album actually entered into the marketplace, I had it convinced in my head that this was not going to happen. I was just convinced that something bad was going to happen. Somebody was going to come in and they were going to sabotage it. We were going to be pushed right to the brink of ejaculation, and then we were going to have to pull out, and we were just going to be all walking around with musical blue balls for the next year because something was going to happen that was going to keep this record from coming out. So I went to one of my record stores here in the Nashville area, a place called Luna, a place I love. They had a pre-release listening party the week before the album was out, and I remember hearing that lyric for the first time. I want to move away from those who stare at screens all day, and I was just hooked immediately. I love this song. I think this song is about censorship, cancel culture. I love the lyric where he says, I'm in search of wisdom so much wiser than my own. I also love when he talks about, when he says, I choose to shoot the breeze with trees and smile with skies. I think that is a lyric that is not necessarily, proclaiming his, necessarily his antisocial tendencies, but I think it's just a song that has a legitimate sort of distrust and, I don't want to say low opinion, but possibly a low opinion of humanity. I think that this one is going to be kind of tough. I actually really like both of these songs. Let me grab my trusty pen here. So Jim Falls versus You're Right, It's Time. Let me see. Man, this one's kind of tough right out of the gate. I do love Jim Jim Falls. I do love that song. I love the sort of industrial set. I think that these are both great side one track ones. I think I did an episode on this channel a while back where I sort of ranked Morrissey's side one track ones. I think it's a very important statement with a side one track one to kick the record off, with a nice killer track. I think both of these songs accomplish that. Okay, I'm going to go with You're Right, It's Time. Not by a lot. I think these are both good songs, but Makeup Is a Lie gets the point on that one. All right, the second track on Dog on a Chain is a song called Love Is on Its Way Out. This is a song that, I like. I don't necessarily think that I love this song. Actually, I think both of the track twos on this album have one thing in common, and it is not necessarily a great thing in common, that being repetitive lyrics. The lyrics to Love Is on Its Way Out get very repetitive. They get sort of boring. I think that this song is an observation of modern life and where the sort of human species is heading. Instrumentally, I really love this song, though I do like the kind of 80s synth vibe. It reminds me of that band, The Knife. I like that the song sort of, it talks about the evils of trophy hunting. Love Is on Its Way Out, like I said before, is a song that, I don't know that it's necessarily one of the weakest songs on this album. I think it is basically just sort of a album track. That one is going up against the second track on Makeup Is a Lie, which of course is the title track. This was the lead-off single for the new album. I remember when the single was announced, or when it was released, I should say. I remember listening to it just probably 20, 30 times, literally. That first day it was released, and at first, it didn't really grab me. In fact, again, as I mentioned before about Love Is on Its Way Out, I don't love the repetitive lyrics. I remember thinking to myself, oh man, I hope that the wordsmith hasn't dried up, because this gets a little bit monotonous. I do love the opening lyric where he says, I found myself in Paris. I remember the first time I heard those lyrics, I remember thinking to myself, man, Morrissey lives such a different lifestyle than I do. If I were to write these lyrics, I found myself in Paris, it would probably sound more like I found myself in Huntsville. And let's face it, all right? There just simply isn't the same ring. I do love the vocal performance on this. I do like the melody. I like the instrumental track. I remember the first time hearing this song. Obviously, this was the first new song released since Rebels Without Applause, which I loved. It's not as good as Rebels Without Applause by any means, but I remember just focusing in on his voice and his vocals, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, his voice, for being 66 years old. Now, keep in mind, Morrissey's vocal styling isn't real crazy. He doesn't, blow himself out all the time. But, man, his voice at his age is unfreaking believable. You can say a lot of shitty things about this man, but you cannot take anything away from his voice at this stage of the game. That being said, Love Is on Its Way Out gets the point. I like that song better. I just do. I think that they are both sort of guilty of being not necessarily high points on the albums and being a little bit repetitive, but I would say I take Love Is on Its Way Out slightly more. Third track on Dog on a Chain is a song that I love. Ironically, a song that for the first year or so of this album's life I didn't like. I don't know why. It was an album, or a song. I always say album. It was a song that was just an incredibly slow burn for me, but now I would say it's one of the high points on this record. I mean, this song, it just drops the funk. The thought of a relatively uptight British gentleman like Morrissey dropping this kind of thunder, I mean, it even gets my Nordic blood out there on the dance floor. And of course, one of the highlights on this track is his collaboration with somebody that I love, that being Thelma Houston. There's just something about their two voices together that it's literally magic. I mean, this is a song that I can go back and listen to anytime. Again, like I said a second ago, ironically, it was a song at first that I did not like. Now, lyrically, I really like this song, although I'm curious. I gotta know, what is it that Bobby is so worried about people finding out? Is it something big? Is it something catastrophic? Is it going to ruin his life if it leaks out? Is he a rapist? Is he a serial killer? Or is it something that's, relatively, benign? Was he the guy that blew up the bathroom at work? I mean, I don't know. His boss walked in after him and sought him out later on and said, "Hey, Bob, you think about going to the doctor, man? I don't know what you did in there, but it ain't natural." Which makes me think of my own work, my own place of employment. I don't know what goes on there, but every time I enter the restroom at work, I feel like I've just walked in on a fresh autopsy. I don't know what it is that my coworkers eat, but I can assure you, the bathroom at my work takes a pounding every day, son. Love the song, Bobby, Don't You Think They Know? But this one's going to be tough because it is going up against one of the best songs off Makeup Is a Lie, that being the third song, that being Notre Dame. Maybe the most controversial song on the record in terms of what it is that he's saying. Whenever it is that Morrissey expresses his opinion, whether it is positive or negative, the haters are always present with the pitchforks and the torches just ready to pounce. I mean, Morrissey is the kind of guy that is so hated by his haters that he could tell you that almonds are his favorite nut and they would go absolutely ballistic. I know what you're going to say, by the way. I know what you're going to say. Almonds aren't his favorite nuts, Jim. Testicles are. Anyway, I do love the song Notre Dame. This was a song that, unlike the title track, Makeup Is a Lie, it is a song that just grabbed me immediately. It's a song that I've not gotten tired of at all. So this one's tough. Oh my God. Man. Oh, man. I love Thelma Houston. I love Bobby, Don't You Think They Know? That song is just, it just drips with swagger and funk. You don't necessarily think of Morrissey as a funky fella, but man, that song is the jugs. Oh my God. I don't know. I'm going to hate myself either way I go. Hate myself anyway, so it's sort of convenient that way. But, all right, I'm going to go with Notre Dame. Oh, man! Oh, Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets the point there. All right. Third song off of Morrissey's 2000 album is the title track, I Am Not a Dog on a Chain, a song that I really like a lot. A song that has this sort of quirky, weird, instrumental introduction, and Morrissey's cadence during the song at the very beginning of it is sort of like bratty, it's sort of kiddie, it's like neener, neener, neener. But this is a song that's about individuality and conformity. I think it looks around at the world today, and it's sort of, I mean, I don't think you can help but notice that if you look around at the world today, it seems as if conformity, which has always been a big part of human nature, it seems as if conformity now has almost become like a religion. I mean, how else in the world can you explain that every male in this country that's under 25 years old looks as if he has broccoli growing out of his head? It isn't necessarily that each one of these individuals thinks that this is a very snug hairstyle. It simply is that everybody else is doing it, so therefore I should do it. That is a mentality. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to prop myself up as something I'm not. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back Johnson. But that is simply a mindset that I've never been able to relate to. I have never been a follower. I've never been a peer pressure guy. I grew up in a small town in the mountains around a bunch of people that you would not want to follow unless they were taking you out of town, son. So I simply do not understand the whole conformist mindset. I think that most people that are attracted to Morrissey and his music, I think that is one thing that we all do have in common. I think we are a community of individualists, much like the man. I also love this song because it builds, it gets angry, it gets louder, it gets clankier, it gets bitchier, it gets brattier, it gets more in your face. As this song sort of builds to its crescendo, you sort of can't help but feel yourself kind of like swelling up with it. I love this song. This is one of the best songs on this album. It is going up against the song Headache on World Peace, on Makeup is a Lie. Keep in mind, the next track on Makeup is a Lie is Amazona. That's a song I talked about at the beginning of this episode. We're going to bypass it right now because it is a cover. We needed to even out the playing field. Amazona is a song that I like. It was a song I liked when it was released as the single. I talked about it when it was released. I think I mentioned it earlier on this episode. You know, Roxy music just isn't necessarily my luggage. It's highly possible that I'm too much of a dullard. I'm a dumb guy. I don't really get it. Amazona, Morrissey's version of it, is very true to the original. I went back. I listened to the original. I listened to that entire album. When Morrissey released Amazona, I liked it. But that's not really the point here today. The point is that Dog on a Chain is going up against the song Headache, a song that I very much like as well. It's got kind of a smooth jazz element to it. I really like the rhythm track. It's got an upright bass. It's got a real kind of cool drum sort of beat to it. It's real sort of jazzy. I really like it. I think that this song... Now keep in mind, we're almost an hour into this video, so say it now because you've already probably judged me for being a dullard. But keep in mind, when I sort of like, you know, try to analyze what these songs mean, it's what they mean to me. I'm not trying to sit here and say, this is what he's saying and this is what you have to believe. I'm saying this is sort of what it means to me. I think that this song is sort of about Morrissey's attitude towards the institution of holy matrimony. That's what I think it is. But this one's relatively easy. I think I'm going to go with Dog on a Chain. I think that one is relatively easy. I love that song. I love what it means. I love what it stands for. I love how it just builds and builds and gets angrier and angrier. And, you know, if you are somebody like me that tends to be a little bit more of an individualist, I think it just really sort of validates how you feel. Although if you are truly an individualist, I guess you don't need to be validated. So I just sort of, you know, made an idiot out of myself once again. All right, the next song off of Dog on a Chain is simply my favorite song off of the album, that being What Kind of People Live in These Houses. Perfect. In my opinion, it's a perfect song. This is a song that I would kill to see live. If Morrissey told me, hey, Jim, you come out and see me, I'll play What Kind of People Live in These Houses, but the next day you have to check out, son, I would consider it because that's how much I love this song. What this song makes me think of is the place that I work. Not necessarily the actual physical establishment where I work, mind you, but the neighborhood I work in a place called Brentwood, Tennessee, which is a very affluent suburb of the city of Nashville. In fact, I believe it is one of the most affluent communities in the entire United States. I've been working there for almost 4 years, so I've become a little bit desensitized to it. I've become a little bit desensitized to what these people are worth, the people that I interact with on a daily basis. Now, most of the people that I deal with in my daily life, in my real life, are decent enough people. Now, a lot of them are Bible thumpers. A lot of them are a little bit too into the orange bastard. But, you know, when you have that much money, I suppose that it makes sense to try to hold on to it. But I've gotten a little desensitized to it in 4 years. But sometimes when I drive around and I actually take note of my surroundings, I look at the houses that these individuals inhabit, it always makes me think of this song. It is the best song on this album. I remember the conversation I had with the Morrissey fan when this album was still current. He told me, the one that told me that he thought that this album should have never been released. He told me that he hated this song, What Kind of People Live in These Houses, because he thought it was too mean. I remember thinking to myself, I don't even know what that means. How is the song too mean? The song is funny. The song is observational. I love the lyrics. I love when he says, what kind of sad dad scratches in this crash pad? What carpet chewer lights up this sewer? I mean, Bill Shakespeare couldn't have done better than that himself. That one is going up against another one of my favorite songs off of the new album, which closes out side one. That being Boulevard. Boulevard is absolutely beautiful. I love this song. It's understated, but at the same time, it's big and it's atmospheric. The vocal track is unbelievable. Vocally, Boulevard might be the best song on the new album. This is a song about loss and aging, if I'm not mistaken. Love it. But, What Kind of People Live in These Houses is one of my favorite Morrissey songs from the past, decade or so. So I got to give the point to What Kind of People Live in These Houses. That is a song that even my wife likes, and my wife would be not somebody that you could accurately describe as being one of the world's biggest Morrissey fans. All right, the next song off of Dog on a Chain closes out side one. It is a song that I'm a very big fan of as well. It's called Knockabout World. Unless I'm mistaken, this song is also about censorship, cancel culture, troll culture. This is a song that I very much like. It is a song that when it was released by Morrissey, I was not very surprised lyrically that he was going to do something in this direction. I really love this song. I am a person that is of the Generation X sort of broad window in terms of my age. I am somebody... Now, I don't have to listen to this song to appreciate this, but it's something that I've always sort of appreciated, especially as the internet has become more and more intrusive in our lives and things like social media and AI. I don't know how it is that people aren't terrified of AI. I am. I'm an old man. I'm supposed to be terrified of things, okay? In 10 years, I'm going to be terrified of squirrels. I'm not even going to go outside. But AI scares me. Things like this scare me. But what it makes me grateful for is growing up at the time when I did pre-internet, pre-cell phones, pre-social media. Living in this world, growing up in this world, I talk to kids all day, every day. I work in a place, I should say, where people love to squeeze out the puppies. I talk to kids all day, every day. I do not envy kids who grow up in this current climate. I am very, very grateful that I got to grow up pre-internet, pre-cell phone, pre-social media. I can't even imagine growing up in a social media world. There was a girl I was in high school with that was sort of my high school crush. And I remember I had a couple of yearbooks. I don't know why, because I didn't have any friends, but I had a couple of yearbooks, and she had pictures in the yearbook. And I was telling a high school kid about this a while back, and he was sort of snickering at what a crusty old fossil I am. But I told him, I said, "Oh, you got a girlfriend? Do you have a girl you like?" And he's like, "Yeah, man." I said, "Oh, what do you do? Do you like stalk her on Facebook?" Or I'm sure kids don't even do Facebook. I'm an old man. Talking about Instagram or whatever. So, "Oh, yeah, I'll look at her Instagram from time to time." And I told him, I said, I can't even imagine that. Because when I was a kid, there was this one girl I went to high school with I was in love with. And all I had to look at of her was her yearbook picture. And her yearbook pictures weren't even that good. I remember looking at the yearbook pictures like, "Oh, why do I like this girl?" Then you see her in the hallway at school. Like, "Oh, that's why I like this girl." Can't imagine growing up in the world that kids are growing up in now. I'm not even saying that to be a great guy, because I'm not a great guy. I just can't imagine. I love the song Knockabout World, but man, it's up against a tough one. Because kicking off side 2 of Makeup Is a Lie is a song that when the track listing for this album was announced, this was a song that I was very curious about just based on its title. And in my opinion, it might be my second favorite song off of the new album. That is Zoom Zoom, The Little Boy. I love this song. I think this song is about youth and optimism and idealism. I love that the character in this song is going to go out there and save the animals. That is something that I totally admire. I love the lyric where Morrissey says, "The cows, the sheep, and the squiggles of the deep." I love that lyric. This reminds me of a story I think I may have told on this channel in the past. I know I've told a lot of clients this story over the years. It reminds me of when I was in college age, or when I was college age. I was in school, I was taking classes, and this was during my last semester of school, and I was sort of really on the cusp on whether or not I wanted to continue on with my formal education, because basically I was going to college in my hometown. I was very burnt out. I was going to school more out of a sense of obligation. I thought it was something I should do instead of something that I was actually, doing well in or taking very seriously, but I was taking a lot of social work and psychology classes. That was something I was interested in when I was in school. And I remember for the final in one of my classes, we had to go out into the field and we had to interview somebody that worked in an area that we were interested in. And when I was taking social work and psychology classes, I was very interested in working with at-risk children. Perhaps it's because of the way I grew up, but I don't know. There was just something about kids. I wanted to be an advocate. I wanted to be a voice for kids who came from sort of rough backgrounds. And I remember I came up with this idea. I was going to call my county office and I was going to try to get a hold of somebody who worked at Child Services so that I could interview them and I could sort of find out what their daily life was. I also had to do it as part of this project. So I called the county office and they set me up with this guy. The lady was very nice on the phone. She's like, "Oh, that's awesome. That sounds so cool. We'll set you up with this guy. You can come in. You can chew on his ear. He's more than happy to talk to you." So I went down to the county office and I met up with this guy. Now, this guy was probably my age that I am now, or perhaps a little bit even younger than I am. And this guy was fucking burnt out, man. This guy had seen better days. This guy looked as if he'd been dead for 10 years and looked as if he wished he'd been dead for 15 years. So I sat down and I was very young. I was very idealistic. I was very optimistic. I wanted to change the world, but at the same time, I wasn't exactly sure if I wanted to continue on with my education. So I sat down and this guy basically gave me the real skinny. I mean, this guy, every dream that I set in front of him, he gently unzipped his pants and he pissed all over it. Over the course of an hour, he basically told me that all of my dreams of going out there and making the world a better place were junk. What you're going to do is you're going to push papers. You're going to be emasculated at every turn. You're not going to accomplish a goddamn thing. Go out there and spend your time more productively. I remember leaving that meeting, driving back to my apartment and thinking to myself, God, that guy really sucked. He did me no service at all. But looking back on it now, because after that, and it wasn't because of him. I'm not going to, put undue responsibility on him for something I decided, but I eventually decided to drop out of school. Obviously, you can tell. But I dropped out of school, and it wasn't because of him. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to accuse him of anything that isn't true, but I remember driving back to my apartment, and I'm just like, I do not want to be that guy. I don't know what it is that I want to be, but I do not want to be that guy. So at the end of the day, looking back on it now, I feel as if he did me a tremendous service because I did not want to be some ineffectual paper pusher. The guy literally, and I'm not even saying this as a bit, the guy literally had mustard on his tie and couldn't care less. Life had beaten him down so much he looked down and thought, no, it's not worth the effort. It's just going to sit there. I really don't care anymore. Anyway, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with Zoom because I love that song. Like I said, that might be my second favorite song on the album. So that one gets the point. Unfortunately for Knockabout World, which I love also. Anyway, kicking off side 2 on I Am Not a Dog on a Chain is another song that I really love. A song called Darling, I Hug a Pillow. This was a song, the first time I heard it, it really leapt out at me. It was a song I really enjoy. Still, to this day, I really like this song. I think it's... I really like... The one thing about this song, musically, I really like... I had to check my notes real quick, but one thing I like about this song is I do like the mariachi... being a Californian, that's something... I like the trumpets. I like the kind of the horn section. I like the sort of mariachi feel to it. It's something that makes me feel sort of homesick about... For California, it's something that makes me feel... sort of warm and fuzzy on the inside. That one is going up against a song called The Night Pop Dropped off of the new album. I really love this song. This is another one of my favorite songs off of the album. This is sort of I would say this is sort of Morrissey's take on Saturday Night Fever. It makes you feel like you're walking around New York City during the disco era. This song has kind of a Warriors soundtrack type of feel to it. It kind of it kind of, to me, it sort of sounds like putting KC and the Sunshine Band, Blondie, and Bowie into a blender. I love it. It's just very infectious, very contagious, a song I never get sick of. So I think as much as I do like Darling I Hug a Pillow, I think I'm going to go with The Night Pop Dropped. I think that one is relatively easy. So I think Makeup gets the point on that one. The next song off of Dog on a Chain is the song Once I Saw the River Clean. Apart from what kind of people live in these houses, River Clean might be my second favorite song off this album. I love it. I love the electronic 80s sort of Depeche Mode inspired instrumental track. I love the autobiographical nature to the lyrics. This song is solid. Anybody that says that this album should have never been released has never sat and listened to the song River Clean. I love that song. This one is going up against Kerching Kerching off of the new album. I think I mentioned it on my last video. If not, it was probably the one before that. But not long before Makeup is a Lie was released, I read a review by somebody that was a self-proclaimed former Morrissey fan. He described himself as being a Smiths fan in recovery. He says in his piece that he became a former Morrissey fan because his wife and his daughter no longer allowed him to listen to Morrissey. I remember thinking to myself, if I was that much of a henpecked twat, I would probably keep it to myself, son. But his review of the album was relatively negative. That was something I was expecting when this album was announced. Whenever it is that the press get a hold of Morrissey, they are going to treat him the same way a dog treats a stuffed animal. So it wasn't anything that I was, caught off guard by, but he did mention that he thought that the one beacon on this album was the song Kerching Kerching, which he said was the best song on the album. So when I went to the listening party the week before the album was released, I was following along on my phone as the songs were playing, and I remember getting kind of excited as Kerching Kerching was approaching, because, a lot of these songs on this album so far are pretty snug. You've got You're Right, It's Time, Amazona, Headache Bowl. there's a lot of good stuff. So I remember thinking to myself, all right, if Kerching Kerching is the best, man, I'm going to buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. Whereas, in my opinion, this is one of the weakest songs on the album. In fact, I would say that just recently, this song has sort of begun to sort of slowly grow on me like a barnacle, and it is a song now that I would say is probably not my least favorite song on the album, but I do think that it is a little bit close. I do think that this song is autobiographical in nature. I do think that Morrissey is explaining to people that he has put his career and his art and his music ahead of everything else in his life. I also think, obviously, with the title of the song and some of the lyrics, and especially the chorus, I do think that this song also is about, the greed of the music industry. Kerching Kerching, it's okay. I would say it's simply okay. This one is easy. River Clean gets the point. That is easy because it is one of my favorite songs off of Dog on a Chain. All right, the next song off of I Am Not a Dog on a Chain is my least favorite. Probably my second least favorite song in Morrissey's entire canon. That is the song The Truth About Ruth. There's just something about Ruth and this song that I simply doesn't connect to me. I've never liked it, never have. In fact, I've been listening to this album a lot over the past week and a half trying to get ready to do this episode, and it's gotten to the point to where I just skip it. It's like, okay, I know I don't like it. There's not really much I want to say about it. The only song in Morrissey's catalog that I consciously think that I like less than The Truth About Ruth is the song Dear God, Please Help Me, which is on Ringleader of the Tormentors. Fortunately, Truth About Ruth is a song that I've never seen live, although in 2024, Morrissey did play on that tour. Both nights I saw that tour in Birmingham and in Indianapolis, he played the song Dear God, Please Help Me. I remember thinking to myself, because I had not seen that song live, I don't think I'd seen the song Dear God, Please Help Me until 2024. But whenever it is, that you hear a song live for the first time, I get excited. I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is awesome. I hate this song. That one is going up against also the weakest song, in my opinion, off of the new album, Makeup Is a Lie. The song is called Lester Bangs. I think I talked about this when I was talking about the album on my last episode. Lester Bangs, of course, was a well-known music critic who passed away back in 1982. I believe he passed away of an accidental overdose. The last album that he ever reviewed is an album that we're actually going to be talking about on this channel in the relatively near future, that being Dare by Human League. Human League are coming to Nashville this summer. I cannot wait for that show. So we are going to be doing an episode on Human League coming up very soon because of that show coming to Nashville. Lester Bangs most famously wrote, of course, for Rolling Stone and Cream magazine. I don't know if this song is necessarily supposed to be a tribute or a dig. If this is a tribute to Lester Bangs Morrissey, I'd like to think that you must have disliked the guy, because this song is not very good. There is one lyric in this song, though, that I love. It's when he says, the nerd hangs on his every word. I do like that song. Hearing Morrissey say the word nerd is pretty cool, in my opinion. This one's tough, just because I really don't think that either one of these songs really deserves a point. But I'm going to go with Lester Bangs, because, honestly, The Truth About Ruth is just junk, in my opinion. All right, the next song off of Dog on a Chain. Oh my God. This is the ultimate slow burn, in my opinion. This is a song, The Secret of Music. I remember the first time I heard this album, I remember thinking to myself, as this song was playing, I remember thinking to myself, what in the holy hell is this? This is something that I simply do not understand. I read a review of this album not long after it was released, and they torched this song in particular. They said that this was Morrissey's lame attempt at avant-garde. At the time, I may have agreed with that sentiment. I remember thinking to myself, Steve, I don't know what in the hell you are smoking, son, but I wouldn't mind having a little bit of it myself. Actually, I don't do that, all right? Don't do that. But this is a song that over time has actually really started to grow on me. Now, I'm not going to say anything that's not true. Let's not get nuts here. Let's not get crazy, all right? This is not necessarily one of my favorite songs on the record, but of Morrissey's entire canon, going all the way back to 1982 with the Smiths, this has to be the most unique, weirdest, probably deepest cut in his entire catalog. This is a song that is just bizarre, and it's like 8 minutes long. But at the same time, it's gotten to where I actually really like it. This was a song that for a year or two after this album came out, I skipped it every time. It's like, I don't want to hear it. This is weird. This is not what he does. This is not what I'm comfortable with. But now, I kind of like it. It's a song that's grown on me. I don't know what it is. It's weird. I'll give you that. I don't exactly know what it is, but it's definitely weird. That one's going up against Icebergs, Many Icebergs Ago. Off of the new album, that song wins. Many Icebergs Ago is awesome. I think the song is about aging. I love it. I love the song. Many Icebergs Ago. I think if Secret of Music were going up against one of the weaker tracks on Makeup Is a Lie, it might have a chance, because Secret of Music is a song I really like. It is, but I don't know. It's just, compared to Many Icebergs Ago, it doesn't really compare. So Many Icebergs Ago gets the point, which brings us to the end. The final song off of Dog on a Chain is a song also, I believe, about aging. The song is called My Hurling Days Are Done. I had to look this up when this album was released. It is not infrequent that I learn things from Morrissey, but I did not know what the title of this song meant. I did not know what hurling was. Apparently hurling is an Irish sport. I don't really care so much about that. I don't really even care so much about American sports. I don't really care about what hurling is. I mean, you can try to explain all of the subtle nuance to me if you'd like, but I'm probably going to quit paying attention pretty quickly, because I lose interest in stuff like that, at a pretty rapid rate. But the song I do really like a lot. I remember thinking to myself when I figured out what hurling was, I think it would be, because I think this song is about aging, I think if you wanted to do a sequel to this song, a song that, proclaimed that I'm even getting older than I was, you could have a song called My Curling Days Are Over. Because if you're too old to curl, you're probably getting up there. I remember recently, during the Olympics, everybody out here was talking about the Olympics, all of the people that I interact with at my place of employment. Sports out here. Now, this isn't everywhere in the United States, but sports out here in the Bible Belt, in the southeastern region of the country, it's like religion. It's basically what I feel like I talk about all day, every day. Now, I am not necessarily the world's biggest sports connoisseur. In fact, most of the time I could sort of live without it, especially the dopes that are on ESPN, the Pat McAfees and the Stephen A. Smiths and all the subhuman garbage that live on that network. But over the past couple of weeks or whatever it was, we were talking a lot about the Olympics, and everybody out here was getting all into curling. I never understood why it is that curling is so popular. Although I will say, I have spent a considerable amount of time in the northern part of the Midwest of the United States. And up there, it makes a little bit more sense because there's ice and snow. And curling is a good way to sort of spend your time if it's too cold to go outside. If nothing else, you can basically just get drunk and start fights on the curling rink. In my experience, that's what Wisconsin is. People drink in the winter because there's nothing to do, and then people drink in the summer to celebrate. Anyway, the song My Hurling Days Are Done is a good song. I think it is a great closer for this album. Again, I don't really know what hurling is, apart from the fact that apparently it's an Irish sport. Apparently Morrissey is too old to hurl at this stage of the game back in 2020. But in my opinion, it's going to lose because it is going up against the best song off of the new album, Makeup Is a Lie. That is The Monsters of Pig Alley. The first time I heard this song was on a live recording that somebody had posted to YouTube off of their phone. I think it was at the O2 show in London, and I remember even listening to the crappy version that somebody had recorded on their phone. This song is special. This song is different. This song is classic Morrissey material. I think you could put the song Monsters of Pig Alley up against anything in either the Smiths or Morrissey's solo career. I think that this song is about the pursuit of your dreams, in spite of those who choose to be obstacles in your path. What this makes me think of is when I was a kid back in middle school and high school, it was my dream to get into broadcasting. I wanted to be a disc jockey. I wanted to be on the radio. I think my fascination with the radio and broadcasting had basically two different, points of origin. One being that I was just obsessed with music. I've always been obsessed with music. This is not anything new to me, but also there was a TV show on back in the early 1980s that my dad and I used to watch together. It was one of the first things that I felt like he and I bonded over. It was a show called WKRP in Cincinnati, and it was just a fun show. It's still probably to this day my favorite sitcom of all time. It is a show that I love. It's a show I've seen every episode of a million times. I never get tired of it, but based on my love of that show, my love of music, it just seemed like a natural fit that broadcasting is something that I would want to get into. Now, it was ironic in a sense because I was a very shy kid. I didn't really talk. I didn't really have a good voice. I didn't really have the personality for it, but it was just something that I thought I would be able to overcome and something that, I would pursue once I got out of high school. But for a lot of people in my life, it was something that they did not like to necessarily support. It was not something that they believed in. In fact, one person in particular, a person that was very important to me, a person that was one of my heroes as a kid, was very outspoken about his objection to me entering into the broadcasting world, that being my grandfather. My grandfather used to always joke that I was going to end up broke. I was going to end up a drug-riddled alcoholic. I was going to be a loser. He did not want me to go out into the world and struggle. I think my grandfather, who was a career firefighter, I think that was his aspirations for me, was to go out and become a firefighter. So any other sort of occupation that I ever sort of threw up as a alternative to that, he always poo-pooed it. But the broadcasting thing in particular, he got real venomous about. And I remember one day specifically, I was railing on about wanting to get into broadcasting. My grandfather, I could get the sense, was getting a little bit irritated with me talking about it. And I told him, I said, Grandpa, if I became a famous DJ, you'd be proud of me. And he said, you know what? Actually, I can't think of anything more shameful than you getting into broadcasting. And just the way he said it and the look on his face, I knew. My grandfather wasn't exactly George Carlin, all right? My grandfather was not known for his sense of humor, but I could just tell by the way he said it that he was dead serious. And it hit me. There was something about it, about what he said and how he said it, that hit me. And it really rattled my cage because my grandfather's opinion was something that was so important to me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that's why I didn't go into broadcasting. In fact, looking at it now and looking at the current state of commercial radio, I'm tremendously grateful that I did not go into broadcasting. That's sort of why I do the show that I do here. As sad and pathetic as it is, that's kind of why I do this show. It's sort of my outlet. It's sort of me being Mullet Jim again as a little kid who wanted to get into broadcasting. This is fun. This is a hobby. I don't expect to become rich and famous doing this. I'm playing for the love of the game, you understand? Now, on the contrary to that story, there is a positive side to that story because this channel is sort of committed and based in positivity. Not long after I had that conversation with my dad, I was back home in California. And one day, my dad and I were at his apartment, and we were talking about broadcasting and my dreams about becoming a disc jockey. And I remember that my dad's wife and my siblings were out of the house. They were out doing something else. And my dad and I were sort of trying to come up with something to do. And, my dad had that moment where he sort of had the light bulb go off above his head. He's like, hey, get dressed. I got an idea. I'm going to see if we can figure something out. So we got dressed and we were driving around. And we were driving around in Chico, California, which is the town near where I grew up. And we pulled into this sort of office park thing, and it was very anonymous in terms of all the businesses were there. And we walked, and my dad said, "Get out. We're gonna go. I'm gonna see if I can get this guy's attention or something." So we went. And we knocked on the door, and this guy. Eventually, we knocked on the door for like 5 minutes. Eventually, this guy comes out, and he kind of peeks his head out. He's like, "Hey, can I help you guys?" And my dad was like, "Hey, this is my son. He's interested in broadcasting. This is whatever the radio station was. I don't remember the call letters or the call numbers, but it was the oldies radio station in Chico, California." And he's like, "Hey, my son, this is the radio station, right?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Hey, this is my son, man. He's really interested in broadcasting. You think it'd be okay if he came in and just kind of took a look around?" It was a weekend and there was nobody else there. And the guy was like looking around. He's like, "I don't know. I'm not really supposed to, but if you come in, you're quiet, you're respectful, you don't touch anything. Come on real quick and you can I'll give you a little quick tour." And he did. He gave me a tour of the studio, and my dad and I got to sit there, and we talked to him for a minute. His name was Rory Miller. I'll never forget that. He was a sort of a local celebrity in my hometown. And I remember my dad and I sat there, and we actually got to watch him do a couple bits on the radio live. And I remember sitting there like, oh, my God, this is like magic. And I could not believe that my dad took time out of his day to find this radio station to talk to this guy. My dad could have easily ended up feeling like an asshole had the guy tried to make him feel like an asshole, but he did it for me. He did it to sort of help me feel good about my dreams and sort of pursue what it was that I was interested in. So that's sort of a pro and con story to what this song makes me think of. I think of this song about being the person that pursues your dreams. And you know what? If other people are obstacles, you just have to hurdle them. You have to get past it. You have to move on from it. Love this song. This is classic material. It's the best song off of the new album. So we're going to tally up the score here real quick. And it looks as if we do have a winner today, my friends, by a score of 7-4. Breakup is a Lie is officially the superior album of Morrissey's postmodern era. I'm very curious to see what you think about each of these albums, each of these tracks, which of these albums in your world reigns supreme. So if you are so interested, if you've made it this far, this might be one of the longest videos I've ever done. I do apologize. If you've made it this far into the festivities without giving up, I do appreciate it. You can always let me know in the comment section which one of these two albums you feel is the best. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store like Harvest Music in Salem, Oregon. Check back for Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And I think I'm good, man. It's almost an hour and a half into this son of a gun. I know I got other things to do, I suppose. I assume, I should say, that you've got other things you should be doing right now. So, until next time, my friends, I'll talk to you then.